On the morning of April 7, 1945, in Tokyo Bay within the Empire of Japan, the first light of day illuminates the home islands as 91 North American P-51D Mustangs from the 15th and 21st Fighter Groups near their assembly area. Inside his Mustang's cockpit, Major James B. Tapp clutches the control yoke tightly. His aircraft's 6 wing-mounted .50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns are primed with armor-piercing incendiary ammunition. The initial P-51D versions hold 500 rounds for each inner gun and 270 for the middle and outer ones, amounting to 2,800 rounds altogether. Subsequent models cut this back to 400 rounds per inner gun to boost dependability, resulting in a total of 480 rounds. Far beneath them, Mount Fuji rises prominently against the pristine dawn sky, its iconic grandeur impossible to miss. The snow-covered summit acts as a key landmark that aviators rely on during the entire operation. As the rising sun stretches shadows over the Japanese landscape, it uncovers a mosaic of rice paddies, rural settlements, and defense facilities untouched by American single-engine planes until now. This assignment marks a historic breakthrough, accompanying B-29 superfortresses far into Japan's interior from an airfield 750 miles distant, a feat that strategists only 2 years prior had considered unfeasible for such fighters. At 0700 hours, over 100 Japanese interceptors swarm toward the U.S. group. Emerging from the misty dawn is a vision that stuns the enemy aviators, single-engine American aircraft above Tokyo, defying assurances from their leaders that such a thing could never occur. The mental blow lands swiftly and cripples morale. These aren't short-range Navy planes launched from carriers, but U.S. Army Air Force's machines that have somehow spanned 750 miles of vast sea to threaten the heart of the empire. Spearheading the counterattack are aviators in Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate, known as the Frank, Japan's swiftest and most sophisticated interceptor, joined by aging Ki-43 Hayabusas, Ki-44 Shokis, Ki-61 Hyans, and A-6M Zeros, along with N-1K-2J Shidens. The Ki-84 could surpass both the P-51 and the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt in climb rate and agility under specific conditions of height and velocity. The ensuing clash would highlight the profound disparity in how the two powers pursued aerial combat, underscoring why U.S. manufacturing prowess yielded what countless pilots hailed as the ultimate extended-range fighter. The North American P-51D Mustang entered the Pacific arena, backed by a legacy carved in European airspace, where it shattered the Luftwaffe's strength and enabled round-the-clock raids on German targets. Originally designed for delivery to Britain, versions adapted by the British to incorporate Rolls-Royce Merlin engines evolved into the U.S.'s premier combat aircraft of the era. Shifting from the early Allison engine prototypes to the Merlin-driven Triumph symbolized one of history's standout cross-border partnerships, blending U.S. design ingenuity with British power plant expertise. This union of the famed Merlin and the P-51 frame ultimately produced the P-51D, equipping the U.S. Army Air Forces with a versatile, high-altitude, far-reaching escort capable of shielding bomber fleets from bases to Berlin and return. Astonishingly, it now stretched from Iwo Jima to Tokyo and back. The Packard 5, a 1657, a licensed reproduction of the Rolls-Royce Merlin 66, generated 1,695 horsepower on takeoff using water injection, climbing to 1,720 horsepower under urgent combat boost. This advanced two-stage, two-speed supercharger sustained peak output in rarefied air where Japanese power plants faltered, their single-stage setups failing to adequately pressurize the sparse oxygen. The P-51D achieved top speeds around 440 mph at 25,000 feet, with a service ceiling nearing 42,000 feet, and featured 650 caliber M2 Browning machine guns embedded in the wings. The equation of lethal output was both overwhelming and meticulously engineered. With each of the 6 M2 Brownings unleashing 800 rounds per minute, the P-51D unleashed 4,800 rounds per minute of focused destruction, equivalent to 80 per second. Every armor-piercing incendiary projectile, at 46 grams and speeding at 2,900 feet per second, unleashed massive impact force, able to breach protective plating, set ablaze fuel systems, and wreck motors with minimal accurate strikes. By late 1944, 14 out of 15 squadrons in the U.S. 8th Air Force over Europe flew Mustangs, affirming the plane's dominance among contemporaries. Such widespread rollout mirrored America's manufacturing zenith, with non-stop factory operations 7 days weekly. Facilities of North American Aviation in Inglewood, California, and Dallas, Texas, churned out P-51s at an awe-inspiring pace. During maximum output, a fresh Mustang emerged from production every hour. When the conflict concluded, a total of 15,586 P-51s across all types had been built, the D variant by itself, account ordering a staggering 8,156 P-51 Mustangs during the war's final stretch. The U.S. outpaced Japan's combined output of every fighter variant over its last 2 years of combat by a wide margin. The Mustang's impressive extended range features, which enabled raids deep into Tokyo, marked a groundbreaking shift in fighter tactics, fundamentally altering the dynamics of aerial combat. Equipped with a pair of 110-gallon external fuel tanks, these planes routinely handled round-trip missions spanning 1,500 statute miles, and aviators occasionally stretched that to 1,600 miles when the situation demanded it. This feat equated to traversing from Los Angeles to Little Rock, Arkansas, solely over open water in a single-engine fighter, relying on the sea as the only backup landing option. The secret behind such endurance stemmed from the Merlin engine's outstanding fuel economy during steady cruising, sipping merely 65 gallons at efficient speeds, paired with the P-51's innovative laminar flow wing that cut drag by 35% relative to standard airfoil designs. North American's aerodynamic specialist Edgar Schmude engineered this laminar flow wing to sustain laminar airflow across a larger portion of the wing, postponing the onset of turbulence and slashing induced drag significantly. In sharp opposition stood the Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate, which joined the Imperial Japanese Army Air Service in June 1944, arriving far too late and in insufficient quantities to sway the conflict's end. Dubbed Gale by the Japanese and codenamed Frank by Allied forces, this interceptor embodied Japan's frantic bid to counter U.S. technical dominance, using whatever assets the struggling empire could muster. Though often hailed as Japan's finest mass-produced fighter of the war, mass-produced was a loose term in this context. What Japan viewed as high-volume output paled against American standards, resembling little more than experimental batches. The Ki-84 delivered swift acceleration and superb agility, armed with as many as two 30mm Ho 155 cannons and two 20mm Ho 5 cannons for substantial striking power. Yet beneath the specs, operational challenges abounded. Each 30mm gun held just 50 rounds, while the 20mm ones carried 150 apiece, yielding a mere 400 rounds overall, dwarfed by the Mustang's 1,880 to 2,800 rounds. Theoretically, the Ki-84 seemed a strong contender, sometimes even edging ahead in certain metrics. It drew power from the Nakajima He-45 Homare, an intricate 18-cylinder radial engine featuring fuel injection and a single-stage 2-speed supercharger enhanced by water methanol boost, delivering 2,000 horsepower on departure. Early trials were encouraging, with test models hitting 387 mph in straight and level flight, and subsequent reports citing peaks of 427 mph under optimal setups with premium high-octane fuel and flawless tuning. But the harsh truths of Japan's wartime manufacturing painted a far grimmer picture, rife with eroding standards, hasty fixes, and widespread breakdowns. Field personnel treated the Ki-84's demanding Nakajima He-45 engine with caution, as did its landing gear, which frequently failed catastrophically at critical junctures. Despite its conceptual sophistication, the HA-45 grappled with persistent dependability issues that intensified amid crumbling oversight. It demanded exacting precision in components, which factories, hammered by relentless B-29 raids and short on superior steel and aluminum, simply couldn't achieve anymore. Countless landing gear assemblies faltered due to subpar heat treating of wartime Japanese metals, riddled with contaminants that thwarted effective tempering. Consequently, numerous Hayates endured leg failures during touchdowns, dooming irreplaceable planes and claiming hard-to-replace pilots after grueling training periods. This gap in build integrity mirrored Japan's overarching manufacturing meltdown, a country that had staked all on a swift victory and faltered badly. U.S. plants, even at peak output rates, upheld steady excellence, enhancing standards through evolving methods. Japanese efforts, however, slid into chaos. The steady erosion of quality assurance left aviators in the dark about any given plane's reliability. Would the brakes hold? Could the power plant endure full throttle? Might it even ascend sufficiently to challenge B-29 superfortresses at 30,000 feet? By 1945, total Ki-84 production reached just 3,514 units, with many sidelined from shortages of spares, fuel, or skilled crews. Among the flyable ones, maybe half qualified as fully battle-worthy on any particular day. The fuel woes alone underscored Japan's dire straits, a power that had waged war in part to claim petroleum supplies. U.S. flyers enjoyed 100-octane avgas, piped from Texas and California refineries and tailored for peak engine output, whereas Japanese operators scraped by on home-brewed or coal-derived substitutes. Late Japanese aviation fuel during the war was frequently rated at 87-octane or below, occasionally dipping to 80-octane, which sapped engine output and triggered knocking that wrecked cylinders, pistons, and valves. In dire straits, certain squadrons tried boosting their supplies with pine root extract from tree remnants, spirit derived from sweet potatoes, and even residues from sake brewing, only worsening motor efficiency and dependability. Aviators described motors that struggled to ignite, operated unevenly across throttle positions, and frequently broke down disastrously mid-air. During the initial mission on April 7th, the Mustangs linked up with their protected aircraft. A total of 103 Boeing B-29 superfortresses from the 73rd Bomb Wing, loaded with tons of incendiary ordnance aimed at Japanese factories. Captain Art Bridge from the 45th Fighter Squadron remembered, "It was quite a sight. The B-29s were completing their formation in a vast ring just as we got there. Sunlight reflected off their metal exteriors, making them resemble a flock of enormous silver fish gliding across the heavens." The meeting point itself showcased a feat of guidance and strategy that American tech edges alone made feasible. The P-51s had covered 750 miles across vast seas, relying mostly on estimated positioning and simple radio direction finders, synchronizing their approach to align with the bomber's timetable to the minute. They had ascended steadily from ocean height to 25,000 feet. Their power plants automatically tuned fuel-air ratios during the ascent, with turbo boosters shifting effortlessly from low to high gear to sustain output. Upon nearing Honshu's shoreline, the P-51 aviators released their 110-gallon extra-wing fuel cells as they detected the initial deceptive passes from over 100 Japanese defenders launching from various bases near Tokyo. The silver drop tanks plummeted toward the ground, sparkling in the dawn light, with some bursting on impact and others ricocheting over paddy fields. The Japanese aviators, piloting a varied assortment of Ki-84s, Ki-43s, Ki-44s, Ki-61s, and naval aircraft like Zeros, plus the recent N-1K2J Shiden Kai, faced their initial jolt. These weren't short-range carrier-based planes, but mainland-style interceptors that had inexplicably penetrated the home islands from outposts deemed too remote. Flight Sergeant Totanamizu, in a Ki-84 with the 56th Sentai, later expressed his astonishment. "When we launched, reports said hostile fighters were nearing Tokyo. We figured it was an error. Maybe they meant bombers. Spotting the Mustangs firsthand, I believed I was hallucinating. It couldn't happen. Our leaders had guaranteed no U.S. fighter could strike Japan from those distant atolls. But there they were, scores of them, cruising like they ruled our airspace. Right then, I realized the conflict was over." Major James B. Tapp, who would later earn ace status with 8 verified kills, was among the initial Mustang drivers to plunge into a group of enemy aircraft. His after-action account, penned soon after the sortie, detailed the clash with exacting detail. They approached in the classic 3-aircraft shot-eye setup, yet their teamwork faltered. The element head would initiate a strike, but companions frequently lagged behind. They appeared reluctant, maybe short on petrol or rounds, or just green. We swept in with a 100mm edge, unleashed short salvos, and pulled up sharply to regain height before they responded. This lapse in Japanese formation tactics mirrored the dire state of their aviator preparation, which had spiraled into disaster. By 1945, nearly all seasoned Japanese flyers had perished, lost in battles over the Solomons, New Guinea, the Philippines, or the Marianas, Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Newcomers got merely 50 hours in the air prior to frontline duty versus the 600 hours U.S. pilots logged before entering war zones. Once the fray subsided and the Mustangs headed back to Iwo Jima, the Sunsetters of the 7th Fighter Command tallied 26 enemy aircraft downed, 1 likely, and 5 hit, losing 2 P-51s and 1 flyer in return. The 13-to-1 success rate on this debut outing would climb further as U.S. airmen honed their skills over the Japanese mainland, while enemy flyer proficiency kept declining. Soon after, ratios hitting 20-to-1 or 30-to-1 turned routine, underscoring not only Yankee dominance but also Nipponese hopelessness. The gap in plane capabilities shone through in fights, especially vertically where dogfights increasingly unfolded. The P-51D's edge stood out notably over 20,000 feet, the typical intercept level. Up high, the Merlin's dual-stage compressor delivered ground-level thrust as Japanese motors gasped for air. The initial compressor squeezed the sparse atmosphere, chilled it via an intercooler, and passed it to the subsequent stage. Further enhancements in the engine's compression squeezed out denser, oxygen-packed air into the cylinders. However, the Ki-84 relied on a solitary stage supercharger without an intercooler or additional stage, leading to a sharp decline in output beyond 20,000 feet. This eroded its edge in velocity and ascent precisely during typical intercept altitudes. Up at 30,000 feet, the Ki-84 struggled to hold 350 mph, whereas the P-51D sustained 420 mph. Lieutenant Jerry Yellen from the 78th Fighter Squadron, who piloted the final wartime sortie on August 14, 1945, August 15 in Japan, recounted a standard encounter with striking clarity. We would catch sight of them ascending to challenge us, trailing heavy smoke from their exhaust as they slammed the throttles wide open. Yet at 25,000 feet, they floundered like stranded fish. Smoke poured from their engines, likely overfueled since the superchargers failed to deliver sufficient air. We plunged into their ranks with our .50 calibers roaring, tracers streaking like precise light rays, and they had no chance to keep pace in our descent or the subsequent pull-up climb. As we yanked back on the sticks, our Merlins hummed powerfully amid the G-forces pinning us down, while their radial engines hacked and faltered, barely holding output. The P-51D managed dives nearing 500 mph with full handling response, its laminar flow wings performing reliably even near transonic speeds. In contrast, Japanese aircraft frequently suffered control inversion or frame breakup beyond 400 mph in dives, with surfaces losing lift or wings ripping away entirely. The gap in aviator skill proved crushing and widened daily. USEs. Pilots reaching Iwo Jima usually logged 400 to 600 flight hours, encompassing over 100 in their model, numerous gunnery sessions, and thorough battle drills against veteran mentors using seized faux planes or realistic mock-ups. They drilled tight formations to instinct, all-weather gauge flying, angled shots at sleeve targets, and strategies honed from 3 years of aerial combat lessons. By 1945, Japanese aviators typically amassed under 100 hours overall, occasionally just 30, with scant shooting drills from ammo scarcity, zero-gauge instruction, and tactics gleaned from books instead of surviving experts who were either lost or locked in endless fights. Mere navigation demands alone sifted survivors from the fated, the enduring from the imminent casualties. Piloting solo engine pursuits on 500-mile loops across immense seas with sparse guidance tools demanded assurance forged in practice and faith in equipment plus backups. American flyers benefited from thorough weather updates drawn from sub-reports and scout runs, precise charts refreshed via aerial photos, and reliable gauges built to exact standards. Rescue subs positioned along paths known as lifeguard leagues plucked scores of ejected crew from the waves, backed by Dumbo PBY Catalinas for water recoveries if ditched. Japanese aviators, meanwhile, ventured out with obsolete charts ignoring fresh blast scars, faulty compasses uncalibrated properly, and zero prospect of salvage if splashed. Their survival floats, when present, tended to seep, and ground famines had already eaten through their distress supplies. In 1945, the magnetic deviation from Iwo Jima to Tokyo stood at 3 degrees west. Tokyo sat between the 139th and 140th meridians, Iwo Jima between the 141st and 142nd, easing returns to straightforward compass bearings, a lucky layout that spared countless U.S. lives. This alignment turned vital amid foul skies or mid-battle confusion, with gyros whirling during turns. A flyer needed only to head south-southeast to eventually spot Iwo Jima's signature Mount Suribachi jutting from the sea, provided fuel held out. The supply backbone of each side laid bare the Pacific Air Campaign's essence: U.S. plenty versus Japanese want. Each Iwo Jima sortie mobilized about 100 Mustangs, guzzling 57,000 gallons of premium fuel and hauling 230,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammo, alongside ordnance and missiles for strafing runs. This covered a single day's action from one field, with 3 squadrons based there alone. Underpinning it all was a vast network linking Detroit factories, Texas oil works, Missouri bullet mills, tied by Liberty ships churning out 3 Dalian C-54 Skymasters shuttling loads over the ocean. Vessels docked at Iwo Jima every day, offloading fuel, shells, replacements, provisions, correspondence, and the myriad essentials required. Maintaining a contemporary air force required constant upkeep. In contrast, Japanese supply chains had deteriorated into utter disarray and urgency. Fuel for aircraft was in such short supply that practice runs were halted, forcing novice aviators into battle without any fresh hours in the sky. Even bullets were strictly limited during operations, with instructions to save them solely for guaranteed hits. The Imperial Navy and Army aviation branches, which were poorly synchronized even during peak periods, now vied fiercely for vanishing supplies like ravenous canines squabbling over remnants. Planes were stripped for components until they resembled mere metal frames, and whole squadrons sat idle due to shortages of wheels, ignition parts, or fluid for hydraulics. Certain outfits tried crafting their own replacements in rudimentary facilities, yielding foreseeably substandard outcomes. The disparity in technical prowess went further than the planes, permeating all facets of their activities. U.S. flyers donned suits that countered G-force-induced blackouts by redirecting blood to the head during sharp turns, relied on consistent oxygen setups that operated smoothly beyond 30,000 feet with built-in flow controls, and connected through VHF communication devices offering crisp signals across various frequencies. Their escape parachutes underwent routine checks and repacking. Dinghies included operational transmitters and current provisions, while emergency packs held items ranging from painkillers to angling tools. Japanese aviators frequently operated sans reliable comms. Their tube-based radios drained vital batteries and seldom performed adequately. They depended on faulty oxygen gear that broke down often past 20,000 feet, causing oxygen deprivation, confusion, and lacked anti-G suits, restricting their capacity to counter U.S. bold tactics without fainting or rupturing eye vessels. On June 1, 1945, termed Black Friday among the Mustang pilots, atmospheric conditions, not foes, posed the deadliest risk, underscoring the boundaries of even superior American tech. Roughly 150 P-51s en route to Osaka encountered a ferocious storm front that weather reports had missed entirely. In mere moments, 27 machines vanished, 24 attributed to the elements, aviators lost in massive thunderheads, colliding mid-air, or exhausting their tanks while seeking open skies. This calamity highlighted how extended-range sorties strained personnel and equipment to the brink, even for the more advanced allies. The squall stretched from ground level up to 40,000 feet, bringing savage jolts, frost buildup, and total obscurity. Flyers described eerie glows flickering along their wings, needles whirling erratically on instruments, and attitude indicators flipping wildly as gyros faltered amid the chaos. The blow to Japanese spirits was devastating and permanent. Captain Yoshio Yoshida, a prominent ace from the 47th Sentai who outlasted the conflict, noted in his journal, Spotting U.S. interceptors above Tokyo has demolished our faith entirely. We'd been assured the B-29s lacked protection and their escorts couldn't extend that distance. Yet, here are Mustangs circling the Imperial grounds, raking our bases under full sun, downing our elite aces like novices. How do we shield the Emperor when adversary planes patrol our hallowed territory unchecked? Those Mustangs, marked with bold invasion bands, appearing so assured and plentiful, reveal the truth our commanders conceal. Defeat is inevitable. We're merely biding time until the end. Very long-range operations tested navigation prowess, as Major Tapp recalled in a post-war discussion. Clashing with enemy interceptors spiked your pulse, yet navigating from origin to destination demanded the most effort. The sea stretched infinitely, barren, mesmerizing. You'd glance at your heading tool repeatedly, doubting its accuracy, fearing a reversal of course. The toll on body and mind built relentlessly. Crews remained buckled in their seats for over 8 hours, barred from rising, extending limbs, or using facilities beyond a tube that iced over at height. They endured stabbing pains in limbs like pinpricks, deadened rears that sparked fears of permanent impairment, and perpetual dread in solo engine craft over boundless waters, where any glitch spelled near-total peril. The P-51D's cabin layout, honed over 3 years of battles and countless feedback from aviators, outshone Japanese counterparts across all key metrics. Its teardrop enclosure granted full-circle sightlines. Flyers could glance rearward simply by swiveling, a vital edge in dogfights. The chair adjusted completely for varying statures. Foot controls shifted to fit diverse limb sizes, and instruments were arranged or to minimize exhaustion for pilots on extended flights. The dashboard layout made perfect sense, positioning the key displays, airspeed, height, and power plant indicators, right where the flyer could see them without effort. Although the Ki-84's cockpit marked a step up from predecessors such as the Zero, it still had drawbacks like limited rearward views blocked by frame elements and the gas reservoir positioned oddly right behind the pilot's head, along with awkwardly situated levers that forced aviators to release the control column during tense situations, plus gauges that were tough to decipher amid battle chaos, particularly under high G maneuvers or when engine tremors caused everything to shake. Weaponry variations played a pivotal role in dogfight results, frequently deciding survival in those fleeting clashes typical of aerial warfare. The P-51D's 50-caliber machine guns, despite appearing underwhelming next to the Ki-84's hybrid cannon setup, delivered key edges that real-world fights had shown to be game-changers. U.S. weaponry stood out for its exceptional dependability, with jamming incidents under 1% during routine upkeep, which ground crews ensured religiously through expert armorers. They packed substantially more rounds overall, 1,880 to 280, versus the Ki-84's mere 400 for its cannons and guns together. As a result, U.S. flyers had the luxury of test firing to gauge distance, tackling several foes in sequence and avoiding the panic of ammo depletion after brief volleys. The flight paths of 50-caliber projectiles were so thoroughly mastered that pilots could strike foes dependably at 400 yards. In contrast, Japanese aviators grappling with a blend of cannons and machine guns faced challenges sinking fire points and coping with mismatched bullet arcs, as cannon shells fell differently from machine gun tracers, rendering precise hits elusive past short distances. The gap in shooting practice was stark even beyond that. U.S. pilots unleashed countless cartridges during drills, honing skills in anticipating enemy paths, judging distances, and unleashing controlled salvos to prevent barrel warp from heat. They rehearsed against drogue targets, simulated weapons via film cameras, and simulated turning battles until angled shots felt second nature. By 1945, Japanese flyers were fortunate to squeeze off even 100 rounds in prep, if any. With shells too valuable to squander on exercises amid frontline demands, plenty headed into battle without ever discharging their armament, forced to master angled firing on the fly while dodging lethal threats. The Sunsetter's final sky skirmish unfolded close to Tokyo on August 10, 1945, as the 15th and 56th Fighter Units tallied 7 victories in one of the war's closing air clashes. At that stage, Japanese opposition felt mostly symbolic, a faint echo of the once dominant force that had overrun the Pacific. Scarce fuel kept most enemy planes earthbound, their reserves siphoned off to fuel kamikaze sorties. Any that took off were typically handled by young novices with scant preparation, high school lads from just weeks prior. Overall, EWO's Mustangs racked up 206 confirmed Japanese planes, down from April through August 1945, accounting for 75% of Pacific P-51 air triumphs. The true tally likely exceeded that, since numerous wrecks over Japanese soil went unverified, vanishing into woods or cityscapes. The broader effects reached well past sky kills, transforming the Pacific campaign's course. With P-51s patrolling Japanese skies, B-29s managed daytime strikes with improved precision, methodically dismantling the enemy's manufacturing backbone. Already battered by resource deficits and earlier B-29 assaults, Japanese output sputtered to a stop under these targeted daylight runs. The mental toll proved just as crushing. Civilians watched U.S. fighters rake runways in full view of the sun, blasting rail lines, hitting vessels in Tokyo harbor, and underscoring Japan's forfeiture of its own skies. The legend of a sacred gale shielding the homeland crumbled when American warbirds buzzed the Imperial Palace grounds. Lieutenant Colonel John R. Morgan from the 457th Fighter Squadron ran multiple photo recon runs over Japan in a customized P-51D, swapping cannons for imaging gear. His accounts exposed the depths of Japanese air power's downfall. We'd sweep over bases Intel claimed held hundreds of machines. Instead, we'd spot perhaps a dozen airworthy. The others sat as husks, sans motors, sans blades, some mere frames stripped for spares. They'd shuffle decoys about to fool our recon analysts into overestimating active fleets, but we distinguished live birds from hulks easily. Certain strips featured mock wooden mock-ups, adorned with bogus insignia, meant to lure our fire from genuine craft tucked into bunkers or draped in netting. The production figures left no room for doubt, and the narrative of the conflict unfolded through grim statistics. During the war, the United States manufactured 15 out of 186 P-51s across every model, surpassing Japan's entire output of all airplane categories in 1944 and 1945 together. Japan succeeded in building about 3,500 Ki-84s, though numerous ones fell victim to destruction on the tarmac from B-29 bombings and carrier attacks, perished in mishaps during instruction owing to subpar oversight, or sat idle without components. U.S. assembly facilities reached their full potential right as Japan's efforts crumbled. Just North American Aviation cranked out 20 P-51s daily at maximum capacity, outpacing Japan's monthly tally of Ki-84s. Every U.S. plane came out virtually the same, featuring swappable components, whereas Japanese models displayed enormous inconsistencies in build and capability, even among those from the identical run. The instruction system echoed this tale of decisive U.S. dominance. Come 1945, America was preparing 30,000 aviators each year, with trainees logging 200 to 300 hours in basic flying before specialized combat prep, followed by an additional 100 hours in tactical drills. Japan's aviator preparation had virtually disintegrated, sending fresh hands into active squads after maybe 50 hours, or frequently far fewer. The calculus of wear and tear proved relentless. The U.S. could replenish casualties while upholding excellence. Japan couldn't offset its depletions, even after slashing criteria sharply. For each aviator Japan readied, America readied 10, and those U.S. flyers arrived far more equipped. Fuel usage laid bare the tactical finale with brutal clarity. A single P-51 sortie from Iwo Jima guzzled roughly 600 gallons of 100-octane fuel per plane, counting onboard reserves plus external tanks. For missions involving 100 planes and routine daily flights, one fighter wing alone burned through 60,000 gallons every day. U.S. fuel carriers supplied millions of gallons each month to outposts in the Pacific, forming a ceaseless stream surging over the ocean. Japan, on the other hand, scraped together airplane fuel from pine tree roots, needing 200 root balls to yield just 1 gallon of marginally effective product, and repurposed trainer planes into kamikaze tools due to shortages blocking standard missions. By August 1945, reserves on Japan's main islands dipped below 200 gallons of aviation fuel, sufficient for at most a single large-scale effort. The P-51D's innovative leap transcended raw specs to capture a full doctrine of combat. The design captured U.S. manufacturing ethos, high-volume output paired with rigorous checks, uniformity among builders, and ongoing refinements drawn from battlefield insights. Each P-51D emerging from the factory proved nearly identical, boasting replaceable elements and reliable handling. A flyer could hop into any P-51D confident in its flight traits and the precise layout of controls and gauges. Japanese planes, more and more crafted by hand using inconsistent supplies and makeshift substitutes, exhibited broad disparities in speed and function even in one batch. A particular Ki-84 could hit 400 mph, while its counterpart from the same plant might barely top 350 mph because of production flaws. Brigadier General Ernest M. Moore, who led the 7th Fighter Command, later noted, "I don't believe there is any question about the P-51 being the best prop fighter of World War II. It was our top air fighter and hence best for escort missions and equal to the P-47 as an attacker against ground targets." This view captured more than the plane's prowess. It highlighted its dependability, ease of upkeep, and flexibility for grueling extended-range duties. The P-51 managed refueling and rearming in 30 minutes, handled 2 sorties daily if required, and thrived on rugged coral strips that would wreck frailer designs. Upkeep figures underscored yet another layer of U.S. edge. P-51Ds on Iwo Jima sustained over 80% readiness amid tough surroundings. Ash from volcanoes infiltrated all crevices, corrosive sea air ate at metal skins, and scant infrastructure forced nearly all repairs under open skies. Support teams swapped engines in 4 hours via portable hoists and uniform protocols, while combat harm that sidelined a Japanese fighter for weeks got fixed by dawn using factory-shipped modular pieces. The Ki-84, even with fuel and munitions on hand, languished at under 40% availability, dropping to 20% at times. Its intricate HA-45 engine demanded rare tools that were scarce, skilled mechanics largely killed or pulled into fighting roles, and replacement bits that needed custom fitting amid sloppy production specs. Aerial scouting for conditions offered a vital edge that spared myriad American lives. Specialized B-29s conducted scouting runs well ahead of fighter launches. Networked reconnaissance aircraft, equipped with instruments to monitor cloud formations, wind velocities, and approaching weather fronts, delivered precise atmospheric information that enabled planners to steer clear of the most hazardous conditions. These aerial observers supplied vital meteorological insights, aiding in the charting of paths that dodged severe storms. Yet, as the Black Friday incident demonstrated, even the most meticulously organized operations could face unexpected meteorological challenges. In contrast, Japanese aviators, deprived of comparable tools, frequently ventured into perilous weather that wiped out whole squadrons. The U.S. prowess in forecasting and evading storm systems markedly lowered mission-related casualties. Meanwhile, Japanese squadrons endured devastating weather-induced setbacks that surpassed their battle deaths by a wide margin. The communications framework bolstering U.S. efforts represented a groundbreaking advancement for the era. High-frequency radio signals emanated from submerged vessels and coastal outposts. Rescue operations directed from submarines, which guided recovery planes toward pilots in distress, along with instant weather reports, formed a protective web that instilled assurance in aviators to test the utmost limits of their plane's endurance. The morale boost from realizing that, should you crash, a search party would be dispatched is immeasurable. Japanese airmen, typically operating without functional radios and harboring no expectations of survival if compelled to land, approached every sortie with a resigned mindset toward likely demise. Their pre-flight rituals were poignantly genuine, as they anticipated no homecoming. Captain Harry Krim Jr. from the 531st Fighter Squadron, who later achieved ace status over Japan with 7 confirmed kills, captured this tactical dominance with stark honesty. "We dominated the airspace above Japan. We flew wherever and whenever we chose. The Japanese recognized this truth. We did too. And crucially, the Japanese populace understood it fully." Each P-51 appearance over Tokyo served as irrefutable evidence that Japan had been vanquished. Air superiority was no longer the objective. We possessed it outright. We were merely showcasing it, pressing it upon them, proving that any opposition was pointless. These ultra-long-distance sorties profoundly altered the strategic balance in the Pacific, invalidating all prior assessments. Japan could no longer depend on vast expanses to shield its core territories. The geographical isolation that had safeguarded them for ages now offered no barrier. The manufacturing core, which had remained largely unscathed through 3 years of conflict, suddenly lay open to routine bombardment. The sudden presence of U.S. fighters above Tokyo demolished the final shreds of faith in Japan's defensive prowess, debunked the legend of the kamikaze, and underscored that loss was not merely conceivable, but unavoidable. The toll on lives mirrored the technological chasm in harsh numerical precision. From July 1 to August 15, 1945, exactly 85 American fighter pilots perished during very long-range operations, though only a mere few, maybe 5 or 6, fell to enemy fighters in dogfights. The bulk of fatalities stemmed from routine hazards, atmospheric issues, equipment breakdowns, navigational mishaps, or sheer fatigue leading to deadly errors. In that span, Japanese aviator deaths reached the hundreds, possibly exceeding 1,000, as complete units were obliterated in vain efforts to challenge U.S. groups. The 47th Sentai, boasting 40 active pilots at the start of April, dwindled to a mere 3 by August. The 244th Sentai was annihilated entirely, rebuilt with fresh recruits, and then eradicated once more. The closing aerial skirmishes over Japan exposed the utter disintegration of organized Japanese aerial strength. On August 14, 1945, August 15th in Japan owing to the dateline, Lieutenant Jerry Yellin undertook the war's final offensive flight. Departing from Iwo Jima alongside his wingman, the 19-year-old Second Lieutenant Philip Schlamberg, they struck runways close to Nagoya. The sortie had been scheduled prior to news of Japan's capitulation arriving at base, and the abort signal, Utah, that might have summoned them back, failed to transmit via radio. Yellin and Schlamberg raked their objectives with gunfire before heading back, diving into a cloud bank to evade flak. Upon exiting the clouds, Yellin found Schlamberg missing, felled by surface defenses to mark the final U.S. battlefield casualty of World War II. Even as surrender loomed, with the Emperor's capitulation address already taped, Japanese gunners persisted in their frantic volleys. Strikingly, however, no enemy interceptors appeared. They had effectively vanished as a viable entity, immobilized by fuel shortages, pilot deficits, or outright obliteration. The ledger of aerial combat stood absolute and undeniable, etched in metal and sacrifice over Japanese heavens. The P-51D Mustang, boasting a 440 mph maximum velocity, 2,000-mile reach with auxiliary tanks, and 6 dependable 50-caliber guns carrying almost 2,000 rounds, left the Japanese mainland utterly vulnerable to daytime incursions. The Ki-84 Hayate, for all its potential specs and the bravery of its crews, lacked the quantity, dependability, or skilled operators needed for a credible counter. This was no balanced rivalry, but a predetermined outcome. The product of the outcome of World War II was shaped as profoundly by manufacturing plants in Detroit and petroleum fields in Texas as by fierce engagements above Tokyo. The formidable prowess of U.S. industry, embodied in the splendid P-51 Mustang, accomplished what blockades at sea and amphibious assaults across islands failed to do: the total dismantling of Japan's capacity to protect its skies. The B-29 bombers that unleashed atomic devastation on Hiroshima and Nagasaki soared unaccompanied by fighters, not due to a shortage, but because protection proved unnecessary. Resistance from Japanese interceptors had been obliterated from the heavens, overwhelmed by the sheer dominance of American ingenuity, expertise, and output. From the 3514 K-34s constructed, just a single example endures today. It resides in the Chirin Peace Museum in Kagoshima, Japan, serving as a lone testament to Japan's frantic bid to rival U.S. technological edge. In contrast, countless P-51 Mustangs persist in museums and personal holdings around the globe. Numerous ones continue to take to the air at aviation events, their Merlin power plants echoing the melody of American manufacturing victory even 8 decades since they dominated the airspace over Tokyo. The stark contrast in preserved planes conveys its own narrative. U.S. planes were engineered for durability, preserved meticulously, and cherished as relics of history. Japanese models, however, were produced for urgent deployment, anticipated to perish in battle, and regarded as disposable. The dismay felt by Japanese aviators upon clashing with P-51 Mustangs above Tokyo transcended mere battlefield astonishment. It marked the staggering awareness that America's manufacturing scale and innovative progress had rendered the unattainable commonplace. Single-engine pursuits conducting 150-mile raids with reserves for 2 hours of engagement before a secure return to base. This defied Japanese understanding or reach. The P-51D Mustang above Mount Fuji transcended mere machinery. It symbolized the pinnacle of American manufacturing dominance, inventive breakthroughs, and the relentless calculus of all-out conflict. The message rang harsh and unequivocal. In contemporary mechanized combat, advanced engineering amplified by vast output guarantees success. The P-51D Mustang epitomized U.S. production at its zenith, over 15,000 units delivered with unwavering excellence, piloted by skilled operators, backed by boundless supply chains, and positioned with tactical acumen. Facing this, Japan's K-84 Hayate, for all its pilots' bravery and sporadic battlefield wins, was utterly outmatched. The jolt of U.S. fighters penetrating Tokyo's skies ultimately revealed the unforgiving arithmetic of warfare. An arithmetic culminating in atomic strikes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, carried out by B-29s requiring no defensive cover since Japan's aerial forces had vanished. The Mustangs executed their mission with merciless effectiveness. They demonstrated that remoteness offered no shield, that raw production outstripped martial valor, and that unmatched technology, wielded adeptly, proved invincible. The Japanese airmen confronting them in the war's closing phase absorbed the severest truth of industrialized conflict. Valor by itself cannot defy the equations of mass manufacturing, cutting-edge development, and supply line mastery. The P-51D Mustang dominating Tokyo's skies affirmed that the era of the samurai had concluded, supplanted by the dominion of assembly lines, forced induction systems, and extended-range interceptor support. The sacred Gale had fallen to empirical knowledge, the fighter's ethos shattered by productive force, and the realm of the ascending sun eclipsed by alloy frameworks and iron-hearted motors.